Welcome back. Now, before we get into that market movement, of course, today is the fateful day we commemorate the proceedings that happened at Marikana, that massacre, of course, which saw a whole host of people passing away, unfortunately. We do cross to our reporter, Mbalenhle Mthethwa. Good afternoon to you, Mbalenhle, who's live, of course, in Marikana for us then. Mbalenhle, the scene's now, a prayer being sought, a few words being shared as well. Won't you just share with us exactly what was being said just moments ago?
Good afternoon, Arabile. Definitely, we have seen the proceedings have finally started, and they've started with prayers, basically in different languages. And one particular person who's praying right now has called on police officers who are involved in the massacre to come forward and give information as to what happened on that fateful day. This is obviously a very painful experience and a painful memory for people, community members in these parts, in this part of Marikana, and that's what has been happening so far. But what's very important to note again, Arabile, is that this year's commemorations happened under a very painful backdrop, the one of a cloud, rather, of job cuts. Earlier this year, Lonmin announced that it would be cutting 4,100 jobs. This basically forms part of plans announced last year to cut 12,600 jobs over a period of 3 years. Now, obviously, this would have a very dire impact on the socio-economic the circumstances in Marikana, given that the people who died on August 16, 2012 were actually fighting for a wage increase, a minimum wage of 12,500 rand. Now, earlier this year again, Joseph Mathethwa, who is AMCU president, has upped this amount to 17,500 rand. They've basically put forward a wage demand of 17,500 rand, saying that the 12,500 rand is redundant, given that the value of that amount of money has been eroded by inflation. So basically, they are asking for 17,000 rand for the lowest paid worker, which could be a rock drill operator, and so on. So that's what is happening right now. That's basically the background and the backdrop under which this year's commemorations are taking place. Now, the wage negotiations are still ongoing. However, we heard earlier this week AMCU President Joseph Mathethwa addressing the media, talking about basically how this has been going. He talked about how Amplat has offered somewhere around 1,000 rand for this year and 800 rand next year and 800 rand in the third year. Now, these are basically 3-year wage agreements that they are negotiating for. However, he also basically said something about Sibanye, which has recently taken over Lonmin, saying that the wage increase that has been offered by Sibanye Lonmin is a provocation, and basically a provocation provoking them to go on a strike. They are basically offering a 3-year wage agreement of 300 rand in the first year, 300 rand in the first year, 350 in the second, and 400 rand in the third. And basically, the AMCU President Jacob Mathethwa was basically saying that mine companies can no longer plead poverty, and basically because these companies, the platinum, have basically these companies have benefited from the price increase in platinum group metals. So for that reason, they cannot plead poverty and give people meager wages. Now, we heard about the squalor conditions that mine workers had been living under during the 5-month strike, which happened in 2014. Now, obviously, this is in the interest, the wage demand is in the interest of improving the livelihoods of these people. We heard earlier today, my colleague Sintleng spoke to a number of people who came in and said that they were unhappy with the wage offer that's been put on the table by Sibanye Lonmin, saying that it's basically going to reverse the gains that they've made since 7 years ago. And obviously, the 12,500 rand wage demand then had gone a long way with regards to improving the lives of mine workers in the area. In one of the stories that were actually done in the lead up to today, one of the people speaking there talks about how they were able to build a house and so on. So some of the demands are basically about improving the livelihoods of the people in this community, basically access to electricity, proper housing and sanitation. So that is what is basically the background of today's commemorations. We do expect President Joseph Mathethwa AMCU president rather, to address the community members who are looking forward to what he's going to have to tell them, and basically inform them about, basically give them an update on the wage negotiations, as well as basically give them a way forward about the job cuts that are looming in this particular sector. For now, Arabile, it's back to you in studio.
Thanks so much for that. Mbalenhle Mthethwa there live for us in Marikana, of course, right where, of course, we had that massacre happen just 7 years on, as we still commemorate and try to find even more answers 7 years on. We'll continue